And good afternoon, good evening to everyone joining us from across the world. Welcome to the Dapper Dollars Leadership Insight series. If this is your first time watching a Leadership Insight live stream, we're thrilled to have you. This series is all about equipping professionals with practical tips and strategies straight from industry leaders. You see, here at Dapper Dollars, our mission is simple: empower individuals to look good, feel good, and do good by making smart financial and leadership choices. And what better way to do it than by creating inclusive spaces for meaningful real world conversations like these? So today's episode focuses on a topic that couldn't be more relevant: financial leadership. Oh, it's going to be interesting. In a business environment where uncertainty is actually more constant than ever, we need leaders who know how to navigate complexity and build sustainable growth. So now, let me introduce to my co-host, Anerban, who will share more about this conversation and also introduce our guest.
Thanks, George. Hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Anirban Bomik. I'm excited to co-host today's session, especially because the conversation we're about to have is critical for a lot of us. Do you remember that feeling when you were in school and you thought you were never going to use this, but you just need to get through the year and we'll never have to use it? Well, that topic today is back. It is finance. We understand a lot of us went through that treacherous time of the year recently, filing taxes. So we're going to be mindful and trust us, we got you. So for those who don't know a bit about me, I studied engineering for my undergrad. When I started my first corporate job, I quickly realized that finance and understanding money played a huge factor in business decision making. And that's why I ended up pursuing a master's degree in business. And afterwards, miraculously, I was accepted to AT&T's Financial Leadership Development Program. That's where George and I had met. As both of us graduated from the leadership program and moved on to marketing, we couldn't escape from finance, and we still use it heavily day to day in decision making. That's where we realized we are so happy that we spent some time in finance to help us bring in a different perspective to our colleagues. And this is why we're excited to sit down with a finance expert who just happens to be a CFO. Not only he pursued finance for his career path, he also played a big impact on many companies with over 40 years of leadership experience, which include 20 years in CEO and CFO roles, 11 years as a managing director in investment banking, and 11 years in Fortune 500 financial leadership roles at public and private companies. Our guest will be bringing us a plethora of valuable advice. As he recently retired from his previous CFO role, he now continues his journey to share his wealth of knowledge and experience through his company, CEO View, which is a financial software and consulting company that helps leaders find insights for their business from a CFO role. So we're so honored to welcome John Martin.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here, Anirban and George. Thank you for having me.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you, John. So we're kind of introducing this new section to our conversations. It's like more like an icebreakers, to loosen muscles and everything else before we go deep into our conversation. So I'm just going to be asking you a couple of nice questions just to kind of get a feel of who you are, how you operate too as well. So starting off, John, are you more a morning person or more a night owl?
No, I'm a morning person for sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. I like that. So now let's go to another segment. So do you like more like a quiet night in, or are you more like the social butterfly who wants to spend an event or time with family and friends?
I'm pretty social for a finance guy. I do like spending time with people, and I always enjoy a night out and have a little fun for sure.
Okay, good. So this is now tapping into your decades of experience. So would you say you thrive in a fast-paced, chaotic environment, or are you more favorable to like structure and calm, basically?
Definitely the former. I enjoy bringing order to chaos, frankly, and it's a lot of what leadership is helping see the vision and calming the storms and building a plan to go achieve something pretty special.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of plays well to my next and final question. So are you more a big vision person, or do you more prefer like the detail in kind of execution in your leadership style?
I always talk about high-low leaders, especially with small companies. You really got to be both. I coined a phrase that I use quite a bit, and it's a whiteboard keyboard leader. You got to have the vision and be able to articulate it.
Yes.
But especially today in business, you got to be able to get on the keyboard and actually do something and deliver results. And so that's kind of one of my brand attributes is whiteboard, keyboard.
Brilliant. I like that. Brilliant perspective. Thank you so much, John.
Nice. I appreciate that. And also for a little background for the audience of how we even met. So my business classmates were your daughter and your son-in-law. And so when we spoke and just talking about it, and I've gotten to know them over the years. And it's funny that the way you mentioned all your your answers for those questions, they're very similar to you. And so it's funny the apple does not fall too far from the tree. So I know I'd love to get to know your morning routine, just like how other people love to know other people's leaders' morning routine. But let's get into some of the questions that people are here for. So just to know and just kind of set up the tone for this conversation. I understand the conversation about finance and how it can relate for other leaders who have to make high stake decisions and while still driving growth, right? So first thing I want to know is, was finance always your calling? Did you just happen to stumble on it, or really kind of share that defining moment that made you pursue finance as a career path?
Yeah, I knew at a pretty early age that I wanted to be a business person. I had a good sense for hard work and value, even as a kid and a student. So I didn't initially pursue finance in college. I pursued architecture, but I soon learned that that was not a great fit for me. But I could take some of those same elements, like creativity and design, and bring them to business. So I was a numbers analytical person, but I really liked using both sides of the brain. And so actually finance was a great fit for me because, I could bring the numbers analytical side as well as that creativity to go build something and do it as part of a team. So that was, it was more in my college career when I figured out that was a good fit for me.
Gotcha. And what about, being a designer, creative architect, and then you pursued finance or finance? How did you decide to go from, hey, I'm not going to be just an individual contributor, but I think finance is my future, and I'm going to go towards that CFO path? What was that one really like life changing, or like that striking moment? Like, I have something here, and I think people perceive me as that as well.
Yeah, it's a good question, Nirban. And I will say it's not like I was one of these people who always said I'm going to be a CEO someday or CFO. It was more just along the way as I gained confidence in my own skills and people gained confidence in me. They could see that, they believed in me, and it was like, it was more incremental, and it was those relationships. And then in life, there's always moments where that pattern of growth is the call, the fear, and the choice. And, it's scary to take on those roles, but, I felt equipped, and there's always risk in life. And I just, felt called, and the company had need of it, and a person of my skills and talent in the right time, right place. And I made the choice to pursue it. And that's really how it came about. And really in every one of my roles, incrementally, all the way to the CEO role.
Cool.
Brilliant. I was just going to jump in. I really do like that response, John. So introspective, and that kind of spills into my question. So you had over 4 decades, for a career, from like when you started to going to like the top of the top and having high leadership positions. I do want to ask, what do you believe makes a great leader now? I'm talking about from a finance perspective or from a leader in general, because you've had CFO and CEO role. So
Right.
What do you think makes a great leader now versus when you started out as well?
Yeah. When I started out, there just wasn't as much technology, frankly, and things didn't go as fast. And it was more about scorekeeping and strategy, but it just didn't move as fast. But now it's, the wealth of data and the pace of business today. A CFO, especially, I'll speak to that, George. A CFO needs to be not only highly analytical, but they need to be very strategic and a great communicator. And really, as part of my roles along the way, it wasn't just the finance side. It was how to help drive strategy, how to be involved in it, and as I said earlier, kind of the whiteboard, keyboard part, how to go execute it. So, and it's all about a value orientation. What is your competitive advantage? How do you build value? And that's really been my perspective all along, is being part of a team that we're building something pretty special for the shareholders and all stakeholders.
I love that. So like the whiteboard, key and board perspective. So what has been what would you say is that I just want to circle back, because I feel that's such a treasure, because in truth, like time, evolution of time, like again, it's not so much technology. You didn't have that at your disposal at that time, but time has moved, and like we are more fast paced, more very I think it's different from that perspective. So from an analytics perspective, like, because you mentioned you're someone who likes to see like the high level. Now, what do you think those skill sets would require? For like a leader now. Given like the 4 decades you've had as well.
Yeah, definitely leaders. There's kind of that book smart, street smart element. You have to be equipped. You in finance especially, and I preach this all the time to my folks that work for me. You've got to understand accounting, the true language of business. How does it work? How do the 3 statements work? How does it work? Debits and credits all the way through financial statements. Then you have to understand finance and business, how the right side of the balance sheet works. How does risk reward work? How does that translate into value on the left side, where the operating assets, how do we harvest our assets to build an effective strategy? But then it's all about data. Where is the data? How do you mine it? And how do you use it as effective to not only run the business, but see patterns to exploit and develop competitive advantage? So I look for, folks that can be strong in accounting, strong in finance, strong in business, and strong in data. And those are the kind of the technical aspects. Then I also look for people who, can communicate. And I've kind of codified this. I call it the 4 I's. They have to have integrity. They have to think in terms of improvement. They have to have insight, and they have to have interpersonal characteristics. Those are what I call the 4 I's of best-in-class finance teams.
Hey, do you mind repeating that again? So you said,
yeah, sure.
Integrity.
And it's kind of funny because it's 4 I's, and it's I have a little logo for it and everything. Yeah. But it's integrity, improvement, insight, interpersonal, and those are it's kind of those table stakes of do you have the integrity in the numbers and understand how the numbers work? Can you improve a process through business insight and drive value, and then ultimately can you communicate it? Are you someone who can reduce things to their essence and communicate it in a kind of concise and compelling way?
Yeah, I like how you are going to provide these kind of in layman terms of how do we conceptualize something, or just something easy to take away. I like the 4 I's. So, and you brought up a really good point, the storytelling piece, because I think now we're in an environment where we're just overloaded with information. There's abundance of it. And with AI being easy available as well for a lot of people, it kind of distills the information a lot. But at the same time, sometimes, like, at least from the models that I've used, like the Gen AI models I've used, it just kind of spews out information that people can take it just without thinking through it. And then kind of blindly stating out, and it might be wrong in your audience. So with this current environment, there's a lot of changes happening. And I don't want to get political, but I also just keep up with the news, and just, again, talking about the information. We're just constantly seeing fed a lot of information that's being changed, whether it's information overload or even just the business environment constantly changing. You don't know where the world is going to head. So the question is, how do you lead that team and the organization when we're going through these uncertainties and changes.
Yeah, you said it really well in Bond. I mean, these are unprecedented times with the pace of technology now with AI, and I loved what you said. Spitting things out, and people will send it on without really thinking through it. Does it match their voice? Do they really understand what they're saying, and is it accurate in context? Because context matters in everything. But more important than context is clarity. And that's how great organizations succeed, frankly, is, they know why they exist. They know how to behave, what their values are. They can clearly articulate what they do, how they will succeed. And they understand what's important right now, how to go execute it, and who's going to be accountable for executing it. And that's clear. It's in every company I've been involved with, especially in my CEO and CFO roles, we always just boiled that down. What is the clarity of why we exist, how do we behave, what do we do, et cetera. And that mission, vision, values, goals, deliverables, and accountability. And that's even more important now when we have all the greater data and more distractions. And sometimes you have to change those things because what worked today or yesterday doesn't always work today. But just having the discipline to have that framework of clarity is all the more important right now.
So,
amazing.
Quick thing. You mentioned framework. We love frameworks here. So, do you have a framework for that?
Yeah, I mean that really is it. I mean, and I'm a pretty avid business book reader, but I actually took a leadership team once through the book The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni, and what I just articulated, he does a really good job of describing that framework. And every organization that I mentioned, as I've been with in the CEO, CFO roles, we've just, everyone in the company could tell you why we existed and how we would be successful. And people knew what their roles were. And, that's just important. And I think that's the best way to get through volatility and uncertainty and just have a team that, is aligned.
Okay.
That is such a powerful perspective. And it's sort of like, incorporating everything you just spoke of, like, having the frameworks, understanding the uncertainty of today's times. And I guess my question is, like, through your experience, how were you able to balance short-term pressures with long-term vision? Because, sometimes, with the pressures from everything, how were you able to work out and build that balance out as well?
Yeah, I love that question, George, because and it kind of comes back to your point in Bond about framework, and I have a decision-making framework that I've used for both, just to, like you say, short-term pressures and long-term vision. And it actually was probably codified in the 4th century by Saint Augustine, I think. But I love it. It says. Well, this is actually another one that I use, but the St. Augustine's was unity in essentials, liberty in incidentals, and charity in all things. And so you have to understand as a leader what is essential and what is incidental.
Yeah.
So that's really important. But the other axiom that I use that is probably more to the point is to view matters objectively, handle things with stability, and make decisions with an envisioned future. So let me repeat that. View matters objectively, handle them with stability, and make decisions with an envisioned future. So I'll use that axiom and I'll say, just think through the responses to COVID. We violated all 3 of them. We didn't really view it objectively. We handled it with a lot of emotion and certainly didn't make too many decisions with an envisioned future. And so those are the types of things that as leaders, you have to understand, what are the facts and data? How do you view it objectively, handle it with stability, and make decisions with an envisioned future? So that helps you to balance short-term and long-term.
I love this axioms, John. And if you ever want to open an Etsy shop to sell those shirts, I'm happy to help you.
I appreciate that. Yeah. I'm sure Kelsey, my daughter, would want to get in on that too, George.
Awesome.
Hey, so okay, you talked about even like COVID. So I want to ask you, was COVID one of those challenging moments, situations, when you were having to steer an organization, or was there a different one in your career that have really you've learned something out of it and something that you can kind of share with the audience? That what was that insight that you gained out of it?
Yeah, no, happy to. Actually, COVID was a time where I kind of went deep to develop the CEO View product you mentioned
Nice.
earlier, where I had a little time to do that, uh, and so that's how I used that some of that time period. But talking about navigating an organization, I spent over a decade in the lab industry
Hmm.
as CEO and CFO in different roles.
And that's
And
pharmaceutical lab, right?
well,
Or also
it was more clinical
diagnostics and
lab.
clinical
Yeah,
labs. Yeah.
I also spent a little time as a board member of a biotech pharma company. But I'm going to talk a little bit about navigating an organization through some pretty difficult times, and as well as some really opportunities to thrive. And the thriving one is, most people think, how did you get through a difficult time?
Hmm.
But one was, how do we really scale and grow a company? And I won't spend a lot of time on it, but I was part of a company that was really novel. We developed molecular diagnostics uh, at a time when it was really not commercialized. There was very few people commercialized it, and we had an opportunity to just scale and really help an immense number of patients, very sick patients in the transplant industry, transplant field, who needed molecular diagnostics to understand, could they survive with an organ or a bone marrow transplant effectively. And we had been recognized as a leader in this field, but our technology and ability to execute was, paper and pencil, pushing data through the lab. And uh, and we had to scale, and we had to scale fast. And I was part of a team that helped scale this lab 10 to 20 fold in the matter of about 6 to 12 months. And it took a lot of teamwork with, how did we get the scientists on board? How did we get, and it was through scientific and science and technology. How did we get the technology people, the scientists, and ultimately, the salespeople and our whole team on board. And we were able to do that. And that was a tremendous opportunity to grow the company. And that company has gone on to be a very successful player, acquired a couple of times since that time when I was involved. But it was just a great learning experience of, we always think about managing through difficulty, but how do you manage through an opportunity to really scale and grow? And that's just one that I help that team, help the scientists see the story. And probably most importantly is as we develop the technology, which I had a hand in doing, is we had to respond to the scientists every morning, is because they were always wanted to go back to the old technology. And it was like, no, we can fix that. We can fix that. And we did. And that's how we did it. And we got their buy-in and confidence to go ahead and take that company to the new frontiers.
That's awesome. What you just said, experience, where you're that experience that you shared with us. And I feel like a lot of the entrepreneurs and kind of like where you're trying to go from growth to acceleration mode, it really speaks to the hard work that's really required. I know from Mark Cuban is someone who I look up to, and he's shared his experience with broadcast.com, where that technology was not available for something that's novel, for to really take advantage of with the current technology available and try to create something new is so hard, because like I work in the internet industry, and for them to broadcast sports over just using lots of landlines and then putting their phone across and then broadcasting over the internet radio is something which we take for granted easily because of all the technology available. But if he had and his company not had thought of something like that, that would not exist today, or some other company would have taken that idea over. So it's cool that you share that, where you had to kind of go where really to get from growth and that challenging situation. You're saying is you have to put in the hard work, and it goes back to what you were saying, that whiteboard keyboard. Someone has
Hmm.
to have that big
Yeah,
vision and be able to put in the work to make that vision come true.
absolutely. And as I'm listening to you, Nirbon, one of the authors I admire is Peter Thiel, and I don't know if
Oh
you've ever
yeah,
read his book Zero to
it's awesome.
One, but he
Yeah, yeah.
talks about how entrepreneurs, the secrets they see in business, and it's that's what fuels them, and that's a lot of what it is the seeing that secret, and where most people would think it's absurd, and
Yeah.
you're like, how do we, as we talked earlier, George, have to take that kind of that uncertainty and that chaos and go build something very special. But the entrepreneur usually has a very good vision in their mind how all that plays out, and but is open to input along the way. But that's a lot of it is those secrets, and then how do you go about turning that to reality.
Hmm.
Brilliant, brilliant, John. So my question is around, like, because again, I just part of, like, while I was chomping at the bits when we were going to have you on this episode, was just again your experience having worked on the CFO side and CEO side. So you had the finance and business experience, and so I guess this is because in my role I see that every day. How
Yeah.
do you actually approach cost optimization without actually hurting team morale?
Yeah,
Also making sure at least you adhere to the long-term growth plans as well.
yeah. Cost optimization is just is an essential in today's world. I mean, we've talked so much about
Yeah.
efficiency and data and tools, and so many white collar jobs of today are at risk because
Hmm.
there are new and more creative ways to do them, and we've seen that throughout our career. Most of the jobs that existed when I was early in my career at early at lower levels hardly exist anymore.
Mhm.
So you have to embrace it as a challenge rather than a threat, frankly.
Hmm.
So I talked about those, qualities: integrity, improvement, insight, interpersonal. Those folks are generally ready, resourceful, and resilient, and they like that challenge, and and they actually are energized by it, and that's what you need, and so you've got to turn it in from a threat to an opportunity. And so that's how I've led teams through that, is really see it as an opportunity. And I'm kind of full of mantras today, but I'll give you another one I love. and, and,
Yeah,
and
I
just
love
because these are the things that I talk a lot about simplicity and how do you boil it down, and people
Yeah.
can resonate with it. And
Yeah.
it is this: it's eliminate, simplify, automate, push out. So the first thing to do is, what can we eliminate? Because so many things, it's a little bit like what's happening in the federal government today.
Mhm.
How do we eliminate all the things that we shouldn't be doing, that we see happening? How do we simplify, the framework and the task at hand? Then how do we automate it? And ultimately, how do we push it out to where the users are doing it, not some central source? And we see that all the time in innovations today and cost cutting improvements. And so those are two kind of perspectives that I bring to that, George.
I appreciate
That's
that. Brilliant.
that's cool. And for the I'm a big acronym person, and I think to remember that, I like that, because I might use that in the future. But I'm gonna remember it as ESAP, just for the audience. So instead of ASAP, it's ESAP.
I've never
So
thought of that. That's
yeah,
even
yeah.
better. I
So
love it.
hey, that's
Yeah,
why I'm
that's
marketing.
great.
So
It's
that's
not,
what,
yeah, it's not ASAP, it's ESAP.
ESAP, exactly. Uh,
That's great.
so yeah, so eliminate, simplify, automate, and push out. Right. So
Yeah.
okay, cool. So I know you've been in some high stake roles, and of course, you have to also, being as a CEO, CFO roles, you have to present to a board, and so that goes back to the storytelling piece and creating this narrative. And how do you go back to what you always like to boil it down? So,
Mhm.
what are those things that you've done to really, whether it's to I know you've mentioned about reading a lot of business books, but what have you done for yourself to really craft that narrative that really earns the trust, inspires the confidence, and then resonate with your audience ultimately, whether it's like your stakeholders or your board, um, and especially even I know like you retired from your other leadership positions, but you're still a founder, CEO right now as a for your own personal company. And how do you do that for in times like this where a lot of people have uncertainty and we might I know you mentioned ESAP, but going back to the
Yeah.
creative crafting the narrative basically.
No, great question. And I've had I've had a lot of experience with boards. When I was in Fortune 500, I had the opportunity to actually present when I was 29 years old to the Sprint
Wow.
Telecom Board of Directors in New York City. And that was a
Wow.
thrill of my, I really enjoyed that. I didn't do a great job, but it was a lot of fun. But since that time, and then I was an investment banker for over a decade and have presented to many boards. And then, of course, worked for private equity and CEO, CFO roles, presented to those boards. And I had the good fortune to serve with a private company that became a public company. And I mentioned earlier, biotech, pharma. So I've seen the board lens from our boardroom from many perspectives. And I'm going to give you two real simple rules in how to work with boards. And number one is don't bury the lead. And, we talked a little bit about my daughter. She's a journalist and a business person, and she'll call me out on that sometimes. Dad, don't bury the lead. And that's a really important call out in business, and especially with boards. And too many people get involved in the board doesn't even know what the issue is until slide 10. And it's like, no, if there's a serious risk or opportunity on the table, get it out there. That inspires trust and confidence. So that's rule number one. And rule number two is really, and I like this one because it also relates to journalism, is don't read the news. Meaning most people just put a bunch of slides together, beautiful PowerPoint slides. And I'll admit, I've been guilty of this. I like the whiteboard side of developing a cool PowerPoint slide and then reading from it and forgetting that, that's not really what boards care about. Boards want to know, sure, they want to know how the business is performing and, all that. But most importantly, they want to know what the biggest opportunities and risks are facing the business. And they want to be involved and engaged in helping management navigate those risks and opportunities. I mean, that's why you have those board members, is they're insightful. They have experience that you as leaders don't have. They've been down the road before and they've seen where the pitfalls are, and they help you steer and navigate through those. And, so that's really what boards want, is they want to be involved. They want you to be open with them. They want to understand the lead issues. They don't want you to read the news. When I say read the news, just read the slides. They want to be engaged and part of it, and they want to help you. They really do. And they're probably most effective when you're in the ditch and need help. And that's how you got to look at your board. They're not a necessary evil. They're a great part of building value and can help management teams immensely.
Got it. So if I had to put an iteration or just kind of make my own version of it. So would you say don't bury the lead is get to the point?
Yeah.
And don't read the news, meaning as in let's have a conversation, let's be real, and let's try to make stuff happen rather than put a whole show and presentation on for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
And slides are important. Another business book I went to a lot early in my career is Guy Kawasaki, who was an early part of the Apple team, Reality Check. And he has a rule that you may have heard of. It's the 10-20-30 rule. Yeah. That it's 10 slides, 20 minutes, and 30-point font. Yeah, I think that's kind of hyperbole because it's pretty difficult to get to that. But it's a good thing to keep in mind. So you're right, Anirban. It's get to the point. don't bury them in slides, and have a meaningful conversation about the issues.
Awesome stuff, John. I just want to say, I think one thing I really like through our conversation so far is just your references to just how you are such a big supporter of continuous learning through all the books you've read, and just really building out that muscle. It's something I'm also working on and just looking to perfect too. So I believe you can never learn too much, and so
absolutely
I really see
continuous learning.
Yes.
You know it.
Perfect. And you had mentioned that sometimes you finding and seeking people who thrive within a leadership space in finance is not just about the technical. So you can write or build the best models, financial models, but sometimes we see that finance is just about people as much as it's about the numbers as well. So I guess this transitions to a different part where I'm looking to see how does, from your experience, more like how does emotional intelligence and interpersonal skills, how do you feel it should show up when managing teams and actually influencing stakeholders? You mentioned your experiences with like your board, also with like, your key stakeholders as well. I just want to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, I love this question because this is something that I've kind of learned and evolved over time, and it was many years ago. I actually heard a sermon where a pastor said this. He said, "There is something that all successful people understand." So he has you on your edge of your seat, and you're thinking, "Well, what is that? Do I understand it? Am I successful?" And his answer was this, and I've used this quote many times, and I love it. It says, and it gets to your question, George. It says, "Success is determined not by position, but by disposition." So I'll say that again. Success is determined not by position, but by disposition. And so when you think about it, we think of the word disposition, and we think about, how we use that word. And, I think the dictionary would say it's like your mood or your tendency or your inclination. He has a sunny disposition. But the word, and think about what it really means, is disposition. And as a leader, you're often in a position of power, and you never want to lead with that position of power. You never want to say, well, I'm the president or I'm the X. You want to connect with people by truly valuing and relating to them, what matters to them, and being conscious of that, where it's not your position, it's your relationships with everyone in the organization, and that's really what servant leadership is. A lot of people talk about it, but it truly is listening, engaging, and building relationships with everybody in the company. And I've always coached that you should try to learn, especially when your company is about 100 people or smaller, even 200, everybody's name in that company, and understand not only their name, but a little bit about them. And then that's how you build those trusted relationships. And then they see, because another quote I love is people, they see what they want to be in leaders. That's it's like, do I see what I want to be in that leader? And before you can even get on that road, you've got to build that relationship. So it took me later in my career to hear that quote, but it was so valuable. And then as I reflected on it, it was kind of like I had done that, but not as intentionally as I wanted to do it, and tried to do it later in my career.
Awesome. One thing I'm realizing that your experience is full of like reflections and inflections. I mean, you shared your experience, like, bombing when you did the presentation to on the board, a sprint. And so but I think that's what I'm saying that to say is actually important, because growth and learning from your mistakes, becoming better at. I think that part is important in building your leadership style and your leadership presence. And given your experience, what advice would you say you want to give to someone who's looking to build that executive presence, and how, again, so they don't maybe they bomb the first time, they can get it better at the second time, but how do you build your executive presence? What were the things you actually did to become better at doing what you do?
Yeah, it's a good question, George. And as I think about how you asked it, because yeah, we all have bombed more than once, many times, and so part of leadership is forgiveness, is seeing when people, when they bombed, it's okay to call them out that, hey, you didn't do that as well as you could have, but here's some tips how to do it better. And so that's one, is just that forgiveness and coaching. Um, so that's one thing that I try to do as a leader. But you also have to be able to willing to confront. But to be able to confront, you have to have that trusted relationship for sure. So that's one thing. And then the other thing, to build executive presence, I think it's not, you don't save it to when you're an executive. You try to follow and look for people early in your career, especially early in your career. Are there leaders that you admire and how they go about their business? And what can you learn and pattern and mirror from them, but bring your own style to it? And so I always coach people early in their career. You want to be in an environment where you're learning, just like we talked about, that continuing learning and learning a lot. And B, you want to be around leaders that you really admire and can see that, hey, later down my career, down the road of my career, what can I do to be more like them? Do they bring attributes that, you didn't really see in yourself, but now you see are possible? And then you start practicing those pretty early in your, as you gain confidence in them. Like I said earlier on, it's not like I set out to have these roles. They were more incremental, and I built those relationships, and people had confidence and bet on me.
Awesome stuff. Thank you, John.
Great. And kind of our last closing questions before we get to the more fun questions as well. And I feel like this would be a great way for the audience to really get to know you and all the insights that you shared with us, and a great way to just really kind of build your legacy. So I know you've recently retired and you're now looking back at your career. You've done a lot of reflection, and as we can see that and hear that from you. So what's that legacy you feel like you want to leave as you've left that CFO role, and how do you want the teams and organizations you've led really remember your impact?
Yeah. I thought a lot about that and a lot of it is that it just boils down to what is the essence of a CFO and really business itself. And it's all about creating shareholder value. And so the legacy is, did you help generate value for business owners? And that's still the main thing in business. And it's that value and that wealth that's created that is so virtuous in business, because it leads to solutions for customers, employment for many that help build the business, vendors who provide the services are getting paid, the communities in which the business exists thrives, and ultimately the government gets paid taxes. So it's this whole business community and how important it is to help generate shareholder value. And, I've been really important, or not really important, I certainly haven't been that really fortunate to play an important role in many firms, large public companies as an employee early in my career, small public companies as an investment banker and board member, and then many PE-owned companies and family-owned companies later here in my career in executive roles. And it's the main thing is still the main thing in business. It is building shareholder value, but you understand it in a context of really how virtuous it is and how success begets success, and all the many entrepreneurs that are created through successful businesses who go on to do the same thing, to invest, to lead. And, that's really America's secret sauce is that entrepreneurial energy, and how business and freedom has allowed us to thrive. And so that's really it. It's just creating shareholder value, focusing on that main thing, and then realizing how virtuous that cycle really is.
I'm so happy for you sharing that detailed explanation, just because I feel like a lot of CEOs, CFOs I've heard talk, they say that they will say about generating value for the shareholders, and that I get it from that perspective. It's a lot of pressure because they have a lot of investors involved. But when you boil it down, really kind of detail it out, what really shareholder value is, thinking about the entire massive impact you are creating for overall economy, for the people who have jobs they're working for, like you said, the vendors who are providing service and getting paid, or the solutions for the customers. And that is
Yeah.
really the biggest impact that you can give to whether it's the country or in a global perspective too. And it's a lot of pressure for a leader to hold that position, but going back to like full circle, where if you have that servant leadership mindset and being able to give back, and not leading with power but giving back with what matters them the most, I think it's a beautiful thing that you're saying, that that's the legacy you want people to remember you as. How can you create the world a better place from where you saw it from?
Absolutely.
+1. And as we go to hopefully and the next and round up segment of this conversation, so it's called the rapid fire. So we're just going to, as we wrap up, ask you a few rapid fire questions. Just give us the first thing that comes to mind, John, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Okay, awesome. So I'll start with the first one. What has been the best career advice you've ever received?
It was early in my career. I went to a retirement dinner for a professor that I had in my university, and he was also an accomplished executive.
Mm-hmm.
And he gave his little retirement speech, kind of like I'm giving mine now, I guess. But he said, he concluded with this advice, and it was simply this: be where you are. And that was so true. I mean, because, you want to build, as we've talked about, build those relationships, invest fully in the job you're in, and show people how important that is. Don't wait for the next job or lament the one you were in. You are where you are. So be there, be present, and be very engaged, and build those relationships. And I've never forgotten that. Be where you are.
I like that. Be where you are. Really cool. This goes to my next one. So if you can have dinner with any historical financial leader, who would it be?
Yeah, I mentioned Peter Thiel earlier. I really like how he thinks, because it's kind of that architect, finance, business entrepreneur, and he's done a millionfold what I have. But I really admire a lot of just the way he's built businesses, and so that was probably the first name that came to mind.
I appreciate that. Brilliant. What's one daily habit that you still keep sharp?
Okay, this is going to get back to the icebreaker, because you asked me, am I a morning person or an evening person? Yeah. And the daily habit is I'm a morning person, and getting up early, and because I think it just gives you a little bit of an edge and allows you to shine just a little bit brighter. And I love this quote. It was Ben Franklin. He said, this one again has you hanging on what he says on what the answer is going to be. He goes, the key to success is found under the alarm clock. And that's true. I mean, so that's kind of one of the things I look at. It's just,
like that.
Get after it, and
shine
a little brighter.
No polar plunge or anything like that for you?
No, I've never done that. I don't plan to.
Awesome. I love that. And this kind of goes, even though you've given us so many examples, but what is one book or podcast that has shaped not only your financial, but your leadership outlook in general?
The one book, frankly, and this may surprise you, it may not, is the good book, the Bible. And part of that is part of leadership and wisdom. It's so much of a paradox as to, we talk about servant leadership. We talk about disposition. You talk about you have to be last to be first. and and that's a lot of what business is that you realize that you're serving others, and it's not, you don't pay yourself first, and you don't look to yourself first. You always look to what can benefit others. And again, it's, if you look at entrepreneurs, they see that narrow road, they see that secret, and they're willing to put all their sacrifices on the line to go, just as we talked about, to take that narrow way, to serve others, to get paid last, and they reap tremendous rewards if they're successful. And that's part of probably I've read a lot of business books, and they're really important. But in leadership, it's also about wisdom, understanding the human condition a little bit, and then understanding how there's hope. And there was actually the word enthusiasm, which is a word that everyone admires in leaders, actually means God within us. And so that's just been a big part of reading that book along with other books, and then trying to put it all into practice in a way that just lifts others along the way.
Thank you so much for actually sharing and speaking on your own faith, John. I really do appreciate that. And so this kind of goes to my final part of the question. Even though we know you have all these anecdotes and axioms and sayings, for what is a fun fact about you people don't actually know?
One fun fact is I have an identical twin brother. So a lot of people don't know that.
I did not know
that. He and I, we grew up together, so obviously, but we've never lived in the same city since college, and so it is always kind of fun when you tell people you've worked with a long time, and oh yeah, my brother's coming to town. Oh really? How old is he? Well, he's the same age as I am. Oh really? That type of thing. So we both had a little fun with it along the way.
Yeah, awesome.
Well, great. We usually close it off with a summary of what we were talking about. And John, you've done a really good job of always repeating yourself of what those note-taking moments were. And so I'm not going to bother with that. So I'm just we're going to follow up with the blog post and, really writing it all out. So, but again, we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for this really powerful and practical conversation. It's not every day that we get to hear such a well-rounded insights, and especially like boiling the information down, and from a finance leader yourself, because like you said, a lot of finance leaders can get caught up in the numbers and not really make it simplified. So really value the depth of experience that you've brought on this conversation. And so for everyone that's tuning in, we hope you leave today's session with a renewed confidence and clear strategies for driving growth and stability within your teams. And don't forget to follow Dapper Dollars on LinkedIn and visit our website for more insights, upcoming events, and leadership resources. This journey does not end here. Remember, leadership isn't about titles, like John said. It's about the impact you create. So keep striving, keep leading, and keep breaking barriers. See you at the next Leadership Insights series.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
See you on it.